Okay, so we are live. Welcome everybody that's listening live. Welcome to those watching the record. So I'm Colin Parsons. I'm the host of something that I'm now calling Vantage Point Conversations. So a little bit of a branding change for me, just so that people recognise me, the conversations, and what I'm trying to do here. So I do these 2 lives a week, and my guest today, I'm gonna say, you told me how to pronounce your name, so I'm gonna say Eelco, but you said it's something like alcohol without the A. That's how I remember our conversation. How's that?
Yeah, pretty good. Eelco. It's a Frisian name, but around the world, the name creates a lot of confusion. So I always say, think about alcohol without the hall, and then I'll listen. When you call my name, I will raise my head and say, "Who's calling my name?" But I've been called many
Mhm.
strange things.
So I always say this is my opening monologue. I never introduce my guests because I always feel that I would either do a bad job or just miss out some of the highlights that people would really want to share with the audience. So would you just take as long as you want just to introduce yourself, maybe give some background, some context, or anything that you think is valuable for people watching to know about you and maybe the conversation today?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I have, as my title in this conversation goes, global nomad. So, get ready for a very long introduction, which I don't think is necessary. I mean, people around the world are not stupid. I would say, look at my face, because people instinctively know. Also, when you watch TV and you see somebody talking, you immediately know, intuitively almost, whether that person is saying what they think and actually are thinking what they're saying. And if you're not sure, just ask yourself, would I buy a used car from this person? Yes or no? And that solves a lot of problems. But a brief dive in my very non-linear checkered background. I started my professional life on the cross point between music and humans. And I decided to go the human way and went to study medicine. Otherwise, you would have been talking now to a cellist, or most likely, knowing myself, to the director of a baroque orchestra or something. But anyway, so I went into humans, and then I'm action oriented. So I went into trauma surgery and emergency medicine, and was successful at this in the United Kingdom and also worldwide. Built a reputation with the World Association of Emergency and Disaster Medicine. As your audience undoubtedly will have figured out already, I am very shy and introvert as a person, but I can hide it really well. Anyway, at some point, I decided that I could spend my life doing great stuff. I mean, exciting stuff, because you would never know what comes through the door. The only thing you know is you have to immediately do something, and you can't hide behind, reading up or talking or lab results or whatever. It's action oriented, and that fits me. But then I decided there was like mopping the floor with the tap running. And when I had this notion in my head that I would spend my lifetime mopping the floor, I decided to look in the direction of, can I also tinker with the tap, and let others who really enjoy mopping the floor do that. And then I slowly went away from patient's misery to systems misery. So I became very active in the field of international crisis, disaster, and risk management. And that put me on the road to becoming a global nomad, because I visited on the ground, uh, boots on the ground. I think everything that you can imagine that can go bad, including terrorism, conflict, ethnic cleansing, earthquakes, floods. I've pretty much seen it all firsthand on the ground. And it is interesting because it shows you the very best in people, but also the very worst in people. And that was very interesting. And you also see that things are repeating themselves. and so that the lessons learned that are not that they are not put in practice, not too late, not at all, or too late, or only partially, and that raised with me and a question in my head: what are the roadblocks that prevents us from implementing lessons learned? Because it's not the first earthquake, not the first flood, not the first conflict, not the first whatever it is, and so I also noticed there was tremendous frustration from people all over the ground. Everybody was frustrated about the fact that we seem to be reinventing the wheel all the time. So I decided to take stock of what people felt were the roadblocks, the causes of their frustration. And during a 10-year period, 5 years as a professor in Finland, 5 years in Washington, D.C., I sort of made an inventory of all these different roadblocks that people thought were the cause of their massive frustration and ever-growing frustration to this day. And we eventually arrived, and not just me, but my global network and the teams that I was working with, we arrived at identifying two overarching problems. And one problem is fragmentation, too many loose ends that are not connected. And the other one is lack of impact. So results that do not meet expectations. We also figured out that the problem with addressing these is that they have to be addressed simultaneously and not separately or consecutively. And that is difficult already in and by itself. Because if you want to fight fragmentation, or if you want to reduce fragmentation, it's better. Then you have to connect, and you have to be a thought leader and a connector. And there are many thought leaders and connectors in the world. But if you want to also reverse lack of impact and increase impact, then you have to have a different skill sets. You have to have executive leadership. You have to be proactive, a can-do attitude. And there are plenty of thought leaders and there are plenty of executive leaders, but there are not that many people who have it in them to sort of go back and forth between both sides. It's in them, and they cycle back and forth effortlessly, it seems. And while they're cycling back and forth like a zipper, they are sort of reducing this distance between fragmentation and lack of impact. And anyway, so those were two big problems. And then we whittled down this list of really thousands of suggested roadblocks that prevent lessons learned from being implemented in practice. We whittled them down to 9. And we built a model around it. And we also figured out that the times are gone that you invite the single expert who arrives and tells people what to do and what not to do and then leaves. We've tried that and it really didn't work all that great. So we also reversed that paradigm as well, whereby the sender becomes the receiver and the senders become the receivers, the audience becomes the senders. And that and then the tagline, all of us know more than one of us. Emerged. And so we have done, these kind of interactive events whereby the so-called expert facilitates and harvests the recommendations from the audience. And these recommendations have to be how recommendations, because from risk to resilience is the same thing as going from the what to the how. From the what is the problem to the how can we find actionable, how can we find action in practice? How can we increase impact while connecting all kinds of different stakeholders together? So it all sounds rather complex, but really it isn't. One of the reasons, one of the ways to express it is the forest and the trees. I do this many times. I mean, complex problems, and we are all convinced that we are dealing with complex problems. Well, complex problems cannot be solved by linear thinking, not by linear people, and not by linear organization. And there are a lot of people, and it is not a judgment of value, but there are a lot of people who can only see this one tree in front of them, and their duty is to tend to that one tree, and we need people like that. But that's one tree. And then you have other people who are less linear, and they see not one tree, but they see a number of trees. And then even less linear and more systems thinking type people, they see the forest through the trees. And then you have additional people who can actually look and see the forest in its environment. And then the people that we are really interested in are the people who can see how that forest relates to other forests and the total environment around it. And again, this is not a judgment of value, but if you start with one tree and then work your way up, that is actually the trajectory that helps you to go from risk to resilience, because from the risk is the problem side, and resilience is really the opportunity side. And let me close this introduction, which actually is much more than an introduction, with a soccer analogy, a football analogy. Think Liverpool, Manchester City, and things like this, but or Real Madrid, and think about this football analogy. If you look at the opportunity side, the question for coaches, supporters, players is, how do we score goals? So then you're looking at the opportunity side. But life is not only about the opportunity, about what goes well. Life is also about what doesn't go so well. And then the question changes. Then the question is no longer how do we score goals, but then the question is, what prevents us from scoring goals? Now, smart coaches, smart players, and smart football clubs, they know this, and they can do both. And that is then you have to fight fragmentation and lack of impact, and you can play it around, whatever way you want. But that is, I think, the briefest turbo summary that I've given, not only of myself, but basically of what we do and why we do what we do and how we do it as well. Back to you.
It's fantastic. I think the only problem you've given me there is I've got too many questions lined up in my head. So let's bounce around. Just a quick question. How do you go from working in A&E to doing this type of this role? Doesn't sound that, having that impact and, looking about how turning the tap on or turning the tap off, that's quite a big jump. So that's the first thing that stuck out in my head. How do you make that transition? Because you've got a reputation. Is that reputation allowed you to move into looking at something different, and you had the connections that way? How did that come about?
Well, I was asking myself, what do I want to do in my life? What is the impact that I would like to have in the time that I am on planet Earth? And when you are working in an A&E department, and I worked in a department with 120,000 new patients per year, that's 10,000 a month. That is a lot. And okay, what could I do that nobody else could do? What would be my added value, my residual impact? And what would that be? 4 to 6 people per year, perhaps, or something like that. But if you go from patient's misery to system misery, so you, instead of only focusing on human assets, you concentrate also on non-human assets, because there is more to the world and to life than only the human factor. Of course, we are human, so we think that it's the be all end all. But it's a little bit like think about nature is, we are part of nature. You have, when you look at humans, you have death and you have dysfunction, or rather, when you look at anything that is alive and warm-blooded, you have deaths and you have dysfunction. But there are also non-living assets in this world. and then you get damage and destruction. Think about houses, infrastructure, essential services, and they go together. And I knew already that medical doctors are terrible managers. They're terrible managers because they're sitting on top of the hierarchy pyramid, and so many medical specialists they tell other people what we are going to do, and nobody questions that because you're on top of the pyramid of hierarchy. So you don't have to explain, you don't have to justify, you don't have to motivate. There's no aftercare or whatever. And so in that transition that I made, I knew this, and I thought, look, I do an international MBA, to get more of a feel for management style activities, because trust me, medical specialists are truly, because they expect that outside of the hospital, that same authority that they have inside the hospital works also outside the hospital, and they assume that is the case, but it isn't, and that makes medical doctors, by and large, very poor managers.
It's amazing. So I just want to understand that transition. Now I want to switch to this fragmentation. So when you were saying that, I was wondering how you actually get to do what you're doing, because as a so I'm really not a big consumer of news, because I tried to push news away oftentimes because I was negatively impacted by it, and I couldn't put the filter on to say what I was reading and what I wasn't, what was truth and what wasn't. So I've actually removed myself from it. So I might not be in the best position to ask this question, but this is how it forms in my head. The world itself seems that it's in conflict with each other, with themselves. You said fragmented. I think even as a society, I would say that globally, I mean, there might be countries that are very happy and get on with themselves, and I don't have that knowledge, but we even seem to, I come from the UK. Even in the UK, we can't get along. We always thinking something. We always are at odds with each other. And I'm just thinking of that in a global scale. How, even if you can't agree within in your own country, how do you start to position that sort of conversation with these leaders, these people that have, if I say power or influence, or are able to move some of these things? How do you even start that conversation and that path?
Yeah, well, as I said, complex problems do not have linear solutions. So you're asking me to come up with sort of the magic bullet here, which there isn't. There are a number of things that are required, a number of ingredients to go from risk to resilience. The issue of the information and the media that you started with, well, I can give you from practice. One of the correspondents that I know really well from the Middle East, his famous quote was, "The first victim in any war or conflict is the truth." And what you so the appeal, you're appealing for trust and truth as the bottom line, and that's true. I mean, reasonable people can communicate and exchange information on that level. I always say, how do we deal with complexity? Then the answer is visualize it. Visualize it. The next question is, how do we deal with uncertainty? How things might happen, things might not happen. Bad things might happen, but bad things might not happen. Good things too. You want them to happen, but they might not. So dealing with uncertainty means throw a scenario at it. And when you combine visualization and throwing a scenario, you're in the realm of storytelling. So if you want to take people with you in whatever it is that then you pull them inside a story, because then people, irrespective of their differences, their backgrounds, then they are together inside the story. So they stop looking at each other and with all their silly agendas and and fighting about things that are really not that important. And inside the story, then they are together, and then you get something that I refer to as the holy shit factor, because they're inside the story now, and now they say, holy shit, what does it mean to me, my family, my community, my career, my country, my city, my planet? And then they have a sense of co-ownership, not only of the problems, but also of the search for solutions. And that brings reasonable people together because you give them a common frame of reference. It's sort of a storytelling. But that is for reasonable people. And reasonable people, they are not lying because they want to lie. They want to be honest, and they want to be. I mean, one of the big things when things really go haywire, the social behavior of people increases. And in the media, you see all these people that run around after floods with plasma televisions and all kinds of expensive stuff that they've taken out of shops. That is not what really happens. The social behavior of people increases when things go bad, and so the term first responders, for instance, with which authorities describe fire services, law enforcement, and ambulance personnel, and also council workers. They are not the first responders. The first responders are your neighbors, and your friends and your family. Those are the first responders. And the people who are we refer to as first responders are second responders. And so when you talk about resilience, it's not about self-reliance, it's about togetherness reliance. And so, yes, but the question, how do we deal then with unreasonable people? Yeah, I have seen so many examples, particularly in Europe, where our leadership, be they thought leaders or executive leaders, they actually believe that you can convince unreasonable people to stop being unreasonable by firing arguments of reason to them. And you can try that, but it's not going to work because these people are unreasonable. So you have to think of something else. But arguments of reason, it's not going to be there. But anyway, truth and honesty, of course, are key. And so this trust between authorities and the population is, as you pointed out, is under pressure. I mean, societal cohesion in the Western world is going out of the window quicker than we would ever imagine. I mean, in the Netherlands, polls have indicated that 4% of the population trust its politicians. Since the corona crisis, you can safely say that in basically most countries in the Western world, 40% of the population does not trust its government and its authorities anymore. And 30% is doubtful whether they can trust their authorities, their leadership. That leaves 30%. And what do most governments do? Whether it's Canada or the Netherlands or Germany or France or the UK, it doesn't matter. They consider these 30% to be 100%, and they completely ignore sort of this high level of dissatisfaction and discontent within their own populations, which is incredible to my mind. It's like it's like a blind spot. Because when you are a democracy, you have to listen to the feedback from your population, and not sort of deny its existence, and that is also relevant for the kind of work that I do, because as Agent Smith pointed out in the movie The Matrix, denial is the most natural of human reactions. This is not happening, not to me, not now, not here, reflex that we also saw in 9/11 and in all kinds of other places where it's just denial. Anyway, it is not an answer to your complex question, but I have highlighted in response. I think some of the ingredients that are there and to look at and then see, depending on the situation, with all kinds of variables, and that's one of the reasons why in our previous encounters I said, and that might be an answer to your question. It's you have to start with developing the big picture, because many people, they are somewhere in the world and they do something here, and then it's successful, and then they do more, so they're expanding what they're doing, they're growing, and that's great. But they don't know whether they're doing this here or there in the big picture, or there in the, they don't know where they are. And so one of the things that we expect from our leaders is that they have walked around and first assessed what the big picture is, because only when you do that, and a lot of people say, well, you're not doing anything. Well, yes, you are scanning the environment. The environment, it can be big, it can be small, it doesn't matter. You can go local, global, it doesn't matter. But get the big picture, because then you know who's doing what and where, and then you can connect people. If you're just staying at this one spot that you're successful in, I'm using my finger here, but it's in the mirror. But anyway, when you're just here, you can't connect with something that's over there, because you don't know where they are, that they are there, and that's the typical idea of fragmentation. And fragmentation and lack of impact, results that do not meet expectation, often go hand in hand. So big picture first, and then it's a little bit like what we all know. Tactics or operations should follow strategy. But what we see, it's often the other way around. So people are doing something, and then they shop around for a strategy that already fits with what they were doing. And so our leaders should be the ones who determine the strategy, and everybody understands it, and what we have to do, how we're going to do it, and they have to also tell us how good is good enough, which they also don't. That's a question that is not asked anymore. And then you get the people when they understand the strategy. Nobody is going to, when there is consensus that is what we need to do, and that's how we're going to do it. And that's then we have solved a lot of the problems that we now see in the Western world.
So there's a couple of, well, there was a lot of interesting things that you said. That idea of storytelling, I think, is very powerful. I think that shows up in so many things that we do. It's about bringing people along; they can connect with emotions and thoughts. It's much more powerful than giving instructions, etc. So I that really sort of lands with me. That was quite impactful when you said like 30%. The numbers of people that don't trust, etc. And I've always heard this from when I was a little kid. It's easy to break trust. So it's hard to gain trust, easy to break it, and even harder to regain trust.
Yeah.
Is that even, if I say worth it, is that, when you're thinking about this big picture, does rebuilding trust come into any of that at all? Is that, if I say that, is that a wasted exercise? Because there's a lot of energy. Sometimes we can overcompensate when we've done something, and then we try to go too far the other way to rebuild trust. That's a lot of energy and focus on that area, and that time and energy might be better served in other ways, rather than to repair a bridge that you blew up accidentally, sometimes on purpose. I'm just giving an analogy of a bridge. How do you see trust in all of this?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this topic of trust, and to cut to the essence of it, there are two things needed to develop and maintain trust between authorities and the population. And with authorities, I do not only mean authorities from the public domain, it could also be private sector authorities, essential services, companies from water or telecom or health or education or finance. These two things are first of all, and what we would call in proper English, we would call that uncompromising forthrightness, a kind of honesty that knows no compromise. That's it, and not just this sort of honesty about the things that you do know and you can do, but particularly this uncompromising forthrightness about what you don't know and what you cannot do. And particularly in the latter part, we see a lot of authorities go down the drain. The second thing you need to give people a perspective for action. A perspective for action, and but that you can only do when you have practical experience. And when you look at career bureaucrats and career politicians, they often have not. I mean that's what they do. They are career politicians, and they have never done anything else. And you see it is in science. One of the things that we also came up with after this decades of transdisciplinary research is the concept of pracademia, because a lot of leadership, they hide behind the backs of scientists and of science. But scientists may be good when asking the what question, but they're not necessarily very good at answering the how questions, because you need practitioners for that. And in the ivory towers of science, there are very few practitioners. In the United States, there is now a growing interest in professors of practice to address this sort of this void. But in many other countries, they're all PhDs that don't know what the hardships of implementation in real life. They have no clue. They have to publish or perish, and it's all about statistical relevance when you do, but functional impact. How good is good enough in real life is a question that you also don't hear many times in university levels. So hiding behind science, no, you have to give a perspective of action. And that's where trusts fall down, either because they're not honest or because there is no perspective of action. Let me then also, from international experience, because there's a lot of talk, you already mentioned it, communications, risk and crisis communication. Basically, when there is something bad happening, and whether it's a sudden onset or slow onset, the people only want to know three things. And to you, as a communication professional who's perhaps interested in this, people want to know three things. The first they want to know is, what is my risk? In other words, what can happen? And so it's not only risk, it's consequences. That's question number one. Question number two is, to the authorities, is what are you doing to help me or help us? And the third question is, what can we do ourselves to help us? So if you style your communication strategy around those three questions, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. But again, the honesty falls down, and then the practical perspective falls down, because career bureaucrats and elected officials often have no sort of, they don't look outside the policy bubble, and that's a problem that we need to address, which is one of the roadblocks, 9 universal roadblocks. Number 3 is the functional distance between policy and practice, and we need to find smart ways of bringing that closer together. Storytelling is one element of doing it. harvesting recommendations from the population. I mean, it's one-way traffic in many systems. I mean, all of us know more than one of us. I mean, when you are a smart policymaker or a politician or a leader, then you want to proactively ask those that you represent or those that you're leading. You say, "Come on, give me your ideas, give me your recommendations. How can we do things better? Should we change everything?" And that brings me also to, if you permit, to another sort of from experience, practical experience, the three essential ingredients of resilience. Resilience is not a status or a box that you tick. You are not resilient. It's a mindset. It's a process that never ends. I mean, the only thing, if you can call it the thing that is really resilient, is nature. And we can just, we are part of nature. But when we look at the human, what makes organizations and individuals resilient? Because resilience is a buzzword now, used by people who have no idea what it is, where it came from, what its limitations are, how to use it. So maybe it's good that we sort of dive into that as well. But it is not a tick of the box type of thing. It's a mindset, but it requires three essential ingredients: resilience. By the way, resilience originates from an obscure part of science, which is called materials technology. There it was originally invented and defined as the ability of any matter after deformation to return to its original state. And then later on, it became a big thing in the 1980s in corporate America. And then it went into mental health. It went into the ecosystems of small island nations or islands. And now it has expanded into basically everything. But anyway, the three essential ingredients that individuals and organizations need to have in order to be resilient or become resilient as a process. The first one is you have to see things for what they are and not what you would like them to be or are afraid they might be. In other words, you have to see what's coming your way. Forewarned is forearmed. See the things for what they are. The second element is you have to give meaning to hardship. So that when something bad is happening, don't go sit in a corner, cry, and wait for help, but get up and do something. And the third one is having an uncanny ability to improvise, which also means that all pre-existing plans, procedures, platforms, throw it out of the window if you think that's better. And then I would refer people to, for instance, disaster movies, of which there are many. Many are over the top, but some of them are not. The Day After is a good one, but not so good one. But I'll highlight this is what happened with the SS Poseidon. The ship that turned upside down, and then describes how a group of people or groups of people are trying to make their way out. And there you see something really interesting. You see that, for instance, those with authority are then not followed because they're not believed. But say, for instance, the lift boy, the young one in the elevator, who is, intuitively, instinctively, people have more trust in people than in hierarchy or authorities. And that's also something that is fascinating, this intuitiveness. So having the courage to throw out pre-existing plans, the third element of resilience. And don't forget, you have to have all three. So not just one or two, but all three of these ingredients. Excuse me. And that was actually, I didn't come up with this. I use it as an example. A journalist from from business, the Harvard Business, what is it? The Harvard Business
School or the
Review, or
review.
Diane Coutu. She talked for years with captains of industry in the 1980s. That was a big thing. And she sort of came up with these three elements, which were later confirmed by another journalist of Time. I don't have her name, I think, from the top of my head. But she wrote a book called The Unthinkable. And she interviewed all survivors from all kinds of different disasters or major casualty incidents in an attempt to figure out what made some people survive and the others, didn't, and what were the differences. And she sort of confirmed that these three elements have to be present. So there you are. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a sort of a simple way of looking at complex issues.
It's very strange because my world really comes from the corporate world, so I stepped away from that a little while ago. But a lot of what you talk about in all of those things, on a very smaller scale, that's that's how I see companies, even in themselves, get things ultimately wrong. Hierarchy, all of this, trust, and I've seen it for myself. So asking the people what they want actually builds something very powerful. It's not that I don't resonate with the others, but I realize that most of the problems in companies, and I can only really speak about companies because that's my experience, and you've got the expertise on the global scale, but people don't ask the people what they want and how things are, and it seems like the simplest thing to do, yet the thing that everybody overlooks. And I don't know why, and I don't know if that's balanced with the hierarchy or status or whatever. It's a very strange concept, and those companies that seem to do well, in my experience, and have longevity seem to be connected with their people. They understand their people, and then when I bring that back to a country or the world or something like that, the ones that seem to be in contact with their people and understand them, not assuming what they want, not pushing things, and having that direct line, that direct interaction with people. And I don't actually know how you would do that as a country, but that seems so aligned to me. But we can't even do that in companies. How do we do that in countries?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying about your experience, your world, which is the private sector. That is the biotope you came from. But really, what we're talking here about is irrespective of type, of location, of scale. It doesn't matter because it's an organization. Everything is an organization. Everything is a network. So when you follow a nature-based cell theory approach, the cell is the smallest unit of things that are alive. So it doesn't matter whether it's an amoeba or a tree or a person or a donkey or a private sector company or an organization, or whether it's local or global. I mean, the principles are the same. You have a cell, and in the cell you have a nucleus. That is the strategic, that's the bridge on the ship. You have organelles that all represent a particular function, like our body has organs. And then you have the cytoplasm, and the cell is encircled by a semi-permeable membrane, and not a closed membrane, because closed systems are dead systems. But it's also not completely permeable. It is semi-permeable. And so a private company, you can fit that model. Public sectors, but also cities, and even our planet is perhaps that. When you look at the private sector, and I think we don't look at the private sector only. We only look at the private sector in connection with public authorities, NGOs, the population. I mean, it's all inclusive. I mean, when you have a cell, you talk about everything inside it, everything in the thing. Now, but when you ask me to look at my experience with companies is in the last 30 years, I refer to it, playfully provocative, as you know me, I refer to it as the curse of the middle manager, the curse of the middle manager, because the middle manager, middle management, was originally designed to facilitate the coming together of the work floor and the board. But what has happened in the last 30 years is that this layer of middle management, this facilitating layer, has become a very impenetrable, thick layer of putty. It's like what you put in windows to seal them, and that hardens. And now it is like a big layer of concrete that is hardly penetrable anymore for what it was designed to do, and that has stopped a lot of collaboration, a lot of connecting, and has not increased impact, because the results are done. The results of a corporation and a public entity ask the question: how good is good enough? No, because that question connects the board with the work floor. So the work floor knows what to do, and the board says whether that's sufficient or whether we need to change something or whatever, change the budget, change whatever it is. And this middle management is not contributing anything to the result of the company. They get salaries, but they have to. That salary has to be earned by the working floor. And so if you want, and so if I would ever be put in charge of any sort of public entity or private enterprise, no surprise to you, but they would only do that when there is a crisis, of course, and they deny, of course, that there is a crisis. I can give you a good example. In the Netherlands, mental health care, right? The entire mental health care sector has a overall budget from the state, for say of about 3 billion euros, not 3 million, but add 3 zeros to it, but billion or trillion, whatever. But the thing is that now, remember this: 74% of this amount of money is spent on checking whether the remaining 26% that actually goes into care has been spent in the right way. Right now, to me, that is outrageous, and that is a crisis. It's public money, it's taxpayers' money, but they did not want a project to remedy this, because then they would have to accept that they are in crisis, and they didn't want to do that. Because then their reputations would go out of the window too. But anyway, that's one example of the value of the question: how good is good enough, which is 9 universal roadblock number 9. And then you're right back to policy and politics and career bureaucrats. I mean, also in the UK, but also in other countries, we go back to Corona. The question, how good is good enough, wasn't asked, wasn't answered. There was no consultation. There was no consensus. The population got very harsh edicts that they had to oblige to. Societal cohesion, fragmentation, caused by the authorities. See, what I've been dealing with governments myself quite a bit. And I've had this discussion. I asked them, why don't you ask the question, how good is good enough? And they're very reluctant to ask this question, because politicians and government officials, they would like to be held accountable for their intentions. And their intentions are always good. but the results are not always good. And they have policy people have a tendency to want to be held accountable for their intentions and not for the results, and that leads to interviews with politicians that they say when something bad has happened and say, okay, what do you think? What was the response? What was the response? And then the political leader says things like, "We did well, but we can do better," which sounds great, but it means nothing in the absence of asking and answering the question, how good is good enough? So journalists, the media, are also here at fault because they always ask the same questions and they have no residual memory of the answers from the past. Because whenever there's something happens, you watch this, when the next disaster, they always ask the same thing. They say, okay, how could this have happened? Who is responsible? And how can we make sure that it doesn't happen again? Now, those are three reasonably, you think those are three good questions. But if you don't memorize and you don't have a sort of a bank, a collective repository of wisdom, of answers that you have received in the past, then you reinvent the wheel as a journalist also every time. And there are no consequences to it when, as long as you don't ask the question, how good is good enough? Just some musings for you, Colin, to confuse you even more.
Not at all. No, it's a couple of things come up in my mind. I'm just going to express them because this idea that something painful happens in our world, and then we have this short-term memory almost, and you're sort of saying, have this bank of questions and accountability. So I've parked that bit, but just I don't know why this comes up in my head, but I'm thinking about when mothers give birth to children. Oftentimes that's not the most pleasant experience. Yes, there'll be mothers that say, yes, it was a fantastic experience, but it's quite traumatic, it's quite painful, etc. And then I think to myself, and they go, I'm never doing that again. And then maybe within a short period of time, they say, oh yeah, I'm going to have another baby. Now, I'm not liking crisis to having a baby, but we seem to have this short-term way and going, okay, yeah. And I don't, why I say that, I can't quite, the connections in my head don't quite land because it's not the same thing. But I'm like, yeah, we have this short-term memory, and yeah, we'll give birth to maybe one more baby, even more. So it's, why do we do that? Then let me just park that idea. But then this other idea, and I know so little about politics. I'm really very basic in my thinking around politics. However, I generally, in my opinion, and that's all I can share, is that governments aren't in power for very long. They don't have any accountability. It always seems the messaging a lot of these politicians have or government have is, oh yeah, we'd spend all our time fixing the stuff that the people were here in the last term and they were doing that. So then we can't fix that because they've created this black hole of funding or whatever. So is any of those two things relevant, what I'm saying, or is that, does that not tie
in at all? Absolutely relevant, more than relevant. I mean, you put your finger on two, I think, essential aspects of from going from risk to resilience, going from what to how, going from problem to opportunity, going from diagnosis to therapy. As far as the birth is concerned, I don't think it should be a topic that two males should discuss, for starters, because we have no idea. As a medical doctor, I have been, facilitating this delivery process, and it is. I can tell you that for many women, it's a relief. They've done this for particularly the last couple of months. It's a burden, and then they are literally relieved of a burden. So I can see this positiveness, particularly also when they're happy when their child is all in one piece and functions and cries and does the right things. But anyway, You mentioned the birth of the short-term memory context. And the example that I often use is, because you're absolutely right, and that is, again, communication, which is one of the 9 universal roadblocks. It's number 7. It's called universal motivation. The example that I often quote relates to Florida. And the term that they coined there is hurricane amnesia. Because every year they have 6 months of the hurricane season, so they know what that's coming. And yet, every year, the emergency managers, the COEs, the Centers of Emergency Managers, and the authorities have to re-educate the public that there are hurricanes coming. So it sort of sinks. It's called hurricane amnesia. That's one thing. Now, when you talk about politics, and I applaud you, I think the best way to deal with policy, with the politics, particularly the way it is unfolding nowadays, is to ignore it. It's like jet lag. How do you deal with jet lag? Just ignore it. So stay that way. You see, it's not just about politics and politicians that you say are temporary phenomenon. It is what is behind the politicians, which are a system of vested interests. So the guardians of the vested interest, both public and private, they represent the system, and the system is only interested in one thing: to let the system survive. And that immediately also explains why visionaries fail. The miserable fate of a visionary is that they will fail because the system is not interested in visionaries, but interested in safeguarding vested interest, business as usual. And so visionaries always fail unless they get supported from their direct environment. So they have to bring their sort of support mechanism with them, or have to be very lucky that for some reason or another, there is support. But a lot of visionaries, they don't make it. So I think you have to look beyond the politics, and the best way to sort of neutralize and not go into sort of a polarization mode is to do storytelling, because then you get the holy shit factor and you bring people together. But another one is this nature-based cell theory approach. That is also sort of a neutral. And if you really want to be successful, or whatever that means, intrinsic or extrinsic. Intrinsically motivated. We work with intrinsically motivated people. That's it. That's what they say. Conditio sine qua non. That's essential for doing this kind of work. You have to be all inclusive. We refer to it as a meta approach, transdisciplinary. So not monodisciplinary, not multidisciplinary, but transdisciplinary. So you can't exclude anyone. And that is also, for instance, something that we see in our current leadership is in the political landscape, is that when you are in a democracy, you can't exclude anyone. I mean, in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Italy, in France, in Germany, you see the so-called populists, the popular movement, that is branded as right fascist extremist. No, it's not. The truck drivers in Canada when they protested, the farmers in France when they protest, that's not left or right wing. That those are the people in the country that tells the authorities that they disagree with the way it is going. So then and then when you see this back into political parties, we have one of the largest political parties in the Netherlands. It has been banned by say the vested interest parties from participating in government, with which they effectively exclude say, 3 or 4 million voters, Dutch people, from having a vote. They have had a vote, but they don't have a voice. and see, these are concerning developments, particularly for countries that pride themselves to be democracies, where the popular, where the population is comes first. And there are a lot of people in this middle management, also in public authorities, that seem to have forgotten that their salaries, their wages, are paid for by the population. And so you cannot just say, "I'm not talking to you," and you no, I exclude you. You're not part of it. You're not part of it. That doesn't make any sense. Finally, I spoke with a very experienced lobbyist. What's called public affairs, but basically it's lobbying. And he has spent a lifetime with dealing with politics. And he said to me, actually, two things. He said, lobbying in the past meant that we had to get things on the agenda, and that was our task, and that was good. But nowadays we have to provide content, because the quality of the career bureaucrats and of the politicians has gone down so much that they have not enough knowledge anymore to actually understand the issues, the topics, the complexity, and how the cause-effect relations and so on. So now you see lobbyists more and more getting involved in doing that kind of work, and he said that is not how it's supposed to be. And he also said to me, he said, where things went wrong is when politicians got the idea that they were there to get solutions for problems. He said that is not what a politician is for. That's not what we have government for. We can do that ourselves. We have the systems, the structure, but the overall government, their only task is to make sure that everybody is involved, that everybody is sitting at the table, and that everybody gets, attention and support. So it's the government, actually, the only task is to ensure societal cohesion instead of causing fragmentation or causing societal cohesion to go down. And anyway, and unfortunately, we don't hear these kind of sounds often enough. So it is, of course, a pleasure to be with you. You are open. You are proactive. You are intrinsically motivated. You have an international orientation. You're not afraid. Have an eye on practice, and you have, despite the misery that surrounds us, maintained your sense of humor. So that's great stuff. So that's why we continue to work together, undoubtedly. And when people see this and they feel that they are also like that, then reach out to Colin or to myself, because there are too few, how shall I call it, three-dimensional cross-thinkers, three-dimensional across thinkers, who can look at things with different lenses, and not just from your own perspective, but from the perspective of other entities, be they individuals or organizations. We are looking for people with that kind of mental mobility to come together and sort of function as a think and do tank, to tackle, to address some of the major highly complex issues, because it forces us not to be a think and do tank, but it's a rethink and a redo tank that we need nowadays.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the compliment, by the way. I mean, I'm conscious of the time, and we'll sort of wrap up. But what I love, and it kind of blends in with the last sort of statements you were making. Your work has basically taken all of the noise, all of the aspects, and look over here, this is the problem, this is the problem. You've taken all of that away, and you've brought that down to, like you said, system thinking, what's actually at play. And that obviously has taken a lot of time, but I love that in so many ways, because those things are easy to get distracted by, but when you bring it back down to fundamentals, some, I want to say, principles, and like you say, these 9 roadblocks, I think that's lovely, because you can start to go, okay, where's that at play? What's actually happening? And it helps get rid of all that noise. And I honestly, I think I could listen to you talk all day long. You have this wealth of knowledge. You have this way of being. You have this experience, this knowledge that's very, very engaging. And yeah, I think it's just so amazing to come across people like you that think at this sort of level, and that you've been doing that. And obviously, that's been a lot of your work for many years now. But I think that's very inspiring to people as well. So yeah, it's amazing what you're doing. I think it gives a lot of hope, and inspires people to, maybe join and reach out and see what they can do as well. Because oftentimes, just to that idea of being fragmented, we think about ourselves a lot. What can I do? How can I make an impact? But we can. And I think speaking to you and how you're doing your work, I think that's very inspiring, and that can give people enough confidence to sort of come out and reach out to you. So honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Mm.
Where best should people come and find more about you? I mean, we've barely scratched the surface. I'm absolutely certain of that. Where is the best place to find you? I found you on LinkedIn, but is there a website? Where would you like people to go?
Well, let me first respond to some of the things that you said, because you thanked me for the compliment, but I'm not polite. I live by the rule that only liars need to have a good memory. So I know that in the English language is a rather indirect language, but no, this is just the truth. There was not a compliment. It's an apt description of yourself. Then another thing that I think is I'm you talk about me in a very positive sense, but I do not think that I am anything special. I know that there are people out there who think that I'm special, but I'm not. I am above, perhaps slightly above average. But I am surprised that there are not many more people that think the same way and do the same thing, because I do not consider myself to be anything special other than perhaps slightly above average. The best way to find me, I think, is on LinkedIn. If you want to know more, you can look with my name and just find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, what it is. And I look forward to continuing our dialogue, because maybe that's something that as a sort of a parting shot. You have a discussion, like a discussion, political discussion or otherwise. A discussion generally has one winner, and the others are losers. And then you have a debate, which is nothing else but a discussion, but with rules and an umpire. That's a debate. All not good enough. What we need is a dialogue. The essence of a dialogue is that everybody who participates in it is a winner.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's continue the dialogue.
Yeah. I one of the things that when I started this channel, it was that I didn't come with an agenda. I have roughly an idea of where I'd like to go, but it's about opening up my mind and being able to build this platform to share ideas and concepts and things. And quite selfishly, I really enjoy actually having these conversations and just opening my mind to and having exposure to people that I would have never have come in contact with. And I'm not the biggest fan of social media because I think there's a downside, but I also I'm very grateful for it because it's put us in connection. And in order for me to have this conversation, I can stream it to other people. And then if that's just one little drop and that has this ripple effect on other people and they hear this, I think, that's maybe part of what I'm doing. And I didn't necessarily start it that way. I just wanted to have these conversations. And I realized on the bigger scale of things, that can have a bigger impact. It has a massive impact on me. And I'm very grateful for understanding all these ideas, concepts, and being in contact with people like yourself and many others that have given me their time. But it also that can share that knowledge with other people, and I'm very grateful for the ability to do that as well.
Yeah, obviously. Excuse me. Yeah, and then also, I will brief you in detail on the 9 universal roadblocks model, because you can use that as a compass, a compass on what you want to do, which starts with a common frame of reference and policy versus practice, also in your work, fragmentation, proactive or reactive. Universal motivation is also important for what you are doing. Return on investment, and then how good is good enough? You can ask yourself, Colin, how good is good enough for what I am doing here? And then the answer to question number 9, is how good is good enough, that feeds into number 1, which is a common frame of reference. And then you go again around the cell with its semi-permeable membrane. So it's a never-ending thing. And I think that the world around us is evolving, is changing all the time, and a lot of people pretend that that's not the case, and we should stop doing that. We should move with what's coming our way, and prepare and respond, and then deal with the consequences. With the 3 ingredients for resilience: seeing things for what they are, give meaning to hardship, and have an uncanny ability to improvise. I think that is that those are good. That those are ingredients that we can cook with, and as they say in the Caribbean, but you have to cook with gas, because people who cook with gas actually do something instead of only talking about it. It's a little bit of
amazing.
Yeah.
A good place to end up. I just do want to make a quick shout out. There was a gentleman, Martin Sornes, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, from Norway. He's been posting comments and very supportive of our conversation. So Martin, thank you very much. I didn't actually put them on you couldn't see them, but sometimes I look at any questions, etc. afterwards. But he's been a massive supporter of what you're saying. So thank you, Martin, and I do appreciate it. So
Okay. Well, you can always invite him as your next guest too.
Oh, you know him well.
A voice from Norway. Yeah.
Okay. Martin, anyway, on my list. I'll be reaching out.
But I mean, go take a look on LinkedIn and ask Colin, because I'm in pretty good direct contact with Colin. He is one of these people who is indestructibly positive. Or at least trying to be, and being indestructibly positive is not something you can learn from a book. You have to have it in you, and then you can develop it, and then you have a lot of capacity for resilience, because always looking for the upward curl is better for resilience than to drown in the downward curl. That's another thing that might be helpful. Not easy, but helpful. Fantastic. All right, Colin, I have to go. I
loved it. Yeah, no. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was great. We're going to do a round 2, 3, 4, 800.
Well, step by step. I always say this. I always say it. Better later, when later is better, and later is always better than never. Nice. So no pressure of time. Nice. Yeah,
I love it.
All right.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Great talking to you. All right. Bye, Colin.
Take care. Bye.